Game of Thrones is one of the most popular television series ever, and is also a well-beloved book series. You can find almost anything these days with the Game of Thrones logo on it. Cups, blankets, board games. So why hasn't there been a video game based in the world of A Song of Ice and Fire? I know you're probably thinking of the Telltale game that came out in 2014, but I'm talking about a full-fledged RPG. A story that takes us across the land of Westeros, where we can delve into the political intrigues of King's Landing, or see the home of the Night's Watch, Castle Black. What if I told you that game might already exist?
What?
In 2012, Cyanide Studios released a Game of Thrones RPG titled, well, Game of Thrones. The game received mixed to poor reviews, and the initial reactions to the trailer didn't help much. People immediately wrote the game off at the sight of the dated graphics, and to be honest, I did too. The trailer also failed to really grip people and give us more of a look at what we'd be getting into with a game like this. I recently came across the game in a bargain bin for $10 and figured, why not give it a try? After about 25 or so hours of gameplay, is it as bad as people think it is? Well, yeah. And no.
What the fuck?
Let's discuss the good thing about this game before we tear it apart. The story is amazing. You get to play as two characters, Mors Westford of the Night's Watch and Alistair Sarwick, a Red Priest. The story coincides with Season 1 of the show in the months leading up to Jon Arryn's death and ends around the time of Ned Stark's execution. Since it takes place during Season 1, it does take some time before things really start to ramp up, especially for Alistair's storyline, but from the second act onwards, this game had me hooked. The plot takes a series of twists and turns. There's betrayal, political intrigue, action. Everything that makes Game of Thrones great is beautifully written in this game, which, funny enough, is written by George R.R. Martin, and it shows. Characters' motives are unclear, and you have to be very careful trusting anybody. Mor's storyline centers around being given a task by Jon Arryn before his death to protect a mysterious girl, and although reluctant to leave his post at the wall, he accepts, in the hopes of seeing his wife and the child he left behind after Robert's rebellion. Alistair went into exile after Robert's rebellion and returns after his father's death to find his home in shambles. He takes up the mantle of Lord of Riverspring to defend his home from his ambitious and cruel half-brother Valar. Both storylines eventually come together around the midpoint of the game, which is when shit really starts to go down, because both of the characters are tied together through an event that happened at the end of the rebellion, which results in the positions that they're in at the start of the game. While I like both of the main characters, I thought Alistair was kind of bland and his voice actor didn't really put much into his performance. Mors, on the other hand, is a complete badass. He's honorable, and when given a task, he's 100% committed to seeing it through, no matter who or what gets in his way. I do think it's kind of funny because Alistair's storyline reminds me a lot of Roderick and Asher Forrester's storyline from the Telltale game. They're very similar in a lot of ways, and seeing as the Telltale game came out just 2 years later, I wonder if they took inspiration from this game for their story. George R.R. Martin also makes an appearance, which is kind of cringy, but also kind of funny at the same time.
Being fair to your tireless quill, please forgive me. So when can we hope to see your completed masterpiece?
Yeah, they're on their way. They're still coming.
He says that every year.
One problem I had with the story, however, was this game can't decide whether it wants you to make choices or have those choices matter. For example, since Alistair is a Red Priest, he performs the rite of the final kiss on his father when he attends his funeral, much to the disdain of the people who immediately scold Alistair since they worship the Seven. Shouldn't that have been a choice? At another point in the story, we have to retrieve a Valyrian steel sword, but the only option to get the sword is either Alistair says we gotta kill the guy, or Mors says we have to kill the guy. Very few choices that you make have any reward or consequence other than certain characters being mad at you. Also, side quests for the most part are uninteresting and unrewarding. I think there was a total of maybe 2 side quests that I actually liked, and there's not very many of them either. Now, unfortunately, this is where we're going to start to get into the problems, and there's a lot of them. The graphics are bad. For a game that came out in 2012, it's just awful to look at. Character models look funny, like for some reason their hands are huge in comparison to their heads. Mors' dog in particular looks fucking hideous. And not in the way they intended, it's just, ugh. Look at this thing.
What the?
Voice acting ranges from okay to downright horrible. Everyone sounds bored and the audio sounds like it was recorded in a shed. Varys and Jeor make appearances in the game and are voiced by their respective actors. But then Cersei shows up and it almost doesn't even look like her. She also sounds like she was voiced by a high schooler, far from the smooth and villainous performance of Lena Headey.
I give you both free rein to track down the man who calls himself the Mother Hen and those he protects.
Combat feels weightless and uses a turn-based combat system, which I have no problem with a turn-based combat system. It's just here in particular, it's unpleasing to look at. You're just sort of watching ugly characters whack at each other with sticks, which is unfortunate because as you level up, you unlock perks which can help you in battle. And when you chain them together with other characters' attacks, you can deal out some immense damage, which also kind of hinders the game because combat stops being a challenge near the end of the game. Not that it was much of a challenge to begin with. There is, however, an interesting roleplay mechanic where you get to pick Mor's and Alistair's strengths and weaknesses. For example, you can have the Born Leader strength, which helps deals out more damage from party members, but you could also have the weakness Asthma, which affects your energy, which hinders your ability to use your perks. It's a very cool mechanic, and as you progress in the game, you'll gain more strengths, but for some reason, no added weaknesses. So by the end of the game, your weaknesses hardly even matter. The game also isn't as open world as I would have liked, despite showing off certain locations on the map. For example, you can see the Iron Islands and you can see the Vale, but you can't really go there. Also, all the areas you do go to are small hub areas with not much to look at or to do, and when I mean small, I mean...
Mr. Horseapin is especially small.
So small.
Also, have you seen how low quality the whores are in this game? Shameful. Shameful.
Shame. Shame, shame, shame. Shame on you. Shame, shame, shame. Shame on you. This was serious, but it turned into something fun.
All in all, I'm really torn on how to feel about this game. Despite an incredible story, the game seems to do everything it can to make the rest of the experience suffer. I almost want to recommend the game for the story alone. And trust me, it really is good. But there's just so much other shit you have to contend with to even enjoy the damn thing. If you are curious, however, like I was, give it a shot. You can get the game for dirt fucking cheap these days, so you're essentially paying $5 to $10 for a great plot line in a shitty game. It just sucks though. Imagine if the story was the same, but everything else got handed off to CD Projekt Red. Oh my god, that would have been amazing, and would without a doubt be considered one of the best games of all time. Unfortunately, however, we are still stuck without a full-fledged Game of Thrones RPG, which is stunning seeing how popular the show is. There was rumors of Bethesda making one that was proven to be
You are fake news.
and even Obsidian got offered to make one but turned it down. Why, Obsidian? Why have you forsaken us? I suppose we'll just have to hope that someday we'll get the game that Game of Thrones fans deserve. Also, despite how shitty this game is, I still enjoyed it more than Season 7.
What